The red sun hung low in the sky, bleeding across the horizon like an open wound. The air was dry, filled with dust that clung to every breath. Two small figures walked slowly across the cracked earth, their feet bare, their eyes tired. One was tall and thin, her skin pale blue with faint silver lines that glowed softly under the fading light. The other was smaller, weaker, her steps unsteady as if every movement cost her strength she no longer had. The older one was named Lyra, the younger, Nira. They were sisters, born on a world that once sang with rivers and forests, but now sang only with wind and silence. The last storm had taken the crops, the traders had stopped coming, and the food had turned to dust months ago. Nira's small voice broke the quiet. "Lyra, I'm hungry," she whispered, clutching her thin stomach. Her eyes were wide and bright like the stars that no longer shone at night. Lyra smiled weakly and placed her hand on her sister's head. "I know, little one. We will find something," she said, though she had not eaten in days herself. They searched the dry ground for roots, for anything green, but there was nothing, only broken stones and empty memories. The wind carried the smell of metal, the smell of humans. For the first time in weeks, Lyra felt a flicker of hope. At the edge of the valley, lights glowed, not stars, but engines. A human supply ship had landed. The sight filled Lyra's heart with both fear and courage. Humans were powerful, some kind, some cruel. They traded supplies for crystals, metals, or sometimes people. Lyra led her sister toward the camp. The humans had built small towers of steel. Guards with rifles stood watching the horizon. They looked tired too, their faces hidden behind dusty helmets. Nira clung to Lyra's arm, her body trembling. A soldier stepped forward, raising a hand. "Stop there, alien." His voice echoed through a speaker. Lyra bowed her head and said softly, "Please, my sister is starving. We only need food." The soldier looked uncertain. "We're under strict orders. No trade without command permission," he replied. Then a taller man stepped out from the shadows, his uniform cleaner, his eyes sharp and tired. "Commander Hale, leader of the human outpost." He studied the two sisters in silence. His gaze stopped at Nira's face. The child's eyes filled with hunger and fear. Lyra stepped closer and spoke again, her voice trembling. "I have nothing to trade, no crystals, no power cells. But please, help her." Hale's jaw tightened. He had seen starvation before, on other worlds. But this was different. There was something in the older sister's voice, something pure, desperate, and painfully human. He turned to his men. "Get them water," he ordered. A soldier brought a small flask and handed it to Nira. The little alien drank too fast, coughing as the cold water touched her dry throat. Hale watched quietly, his heart heavy. When the flask was empty, Lyra looked up again. "Please, I can work," she said. "I can clean, I can serve, anything you ask. Just give my sister food." Hale frowned. "We don't take slaves," he said firmly. Lyra shook her head. "Then take me as a helper, as a servant. Take me instead of letting her die." The humans exchanged glances. Some whispered that it was too dangerous, others that it was cruel to refuse. Hale said nothing for a long time. He finally looked at Nira again, the small child sleeping against her sister's arm, and he sighed. "Bring some food packs," he said quietly, "and a place in the med bay for her." Lyra's eyes filled with tears. She bowed low, whispering words in her alien tongue, words of gratitude and sorrow. That night, as the red sun sank completely, the human camp glowed with dim lights. Nira slept peacefully for the first time in weeks, and Lyra sat outside, staring at the sky. She knew she had traded something she could never get back. The stars above shimmered faintly through the dust, and Lyra whispered to them, "If this is what it takes to save her, then let it be." Her voice was soft, but it carried across the barren land like a prayer, and somewhere beyond that red sky, something, or someone, was listening. Morning came with a pale red sky and the sound of machines waking. The human camp was alive again, soldiers walking, drones humming, and the smell of heated rations in the air. Lyra sat beside her sleeping sister, watching the humans from a distance. Every movement, every metallic sound, reminded her how fragile she was in their world. Nira's lips still carried crumbs of the food pack she had eaten before sleeping, and her face looked peaceful for the first time in many cycles. Commander Hale stood near the edge of the landing bay, speaking with his officers. He noticed Lyra sitting alone, her eyes distant yet filled with silent determination. He knew what she had offered last night, and though he had accepted her sister into the med bay, he had refused to accept her as a servant. But Lyra had made up her mind. She would not let the humans feed her sister for free. When Nira was taken inside the medical tent, Lyra followed Hale to his command station. He turned as she entered, his expression unreadable. "You should rest," he said. "Your sister needs you." Lyra stood tall, her silver-lined skin glowing faintly in the cold light. "Commander, I cannot rest when I owe a debt. Your people gave food to my sister. I must repay it." Hale crossed his arms. "We're not here to collect debts," he said, but Lyra shook her head. "Among my people, to take and not give is shame. I cannot live in shame." Her voice trembled, but her eyes did not. She stepped closer, lowering her head. "I have no gold, no gems, no land. I only have myself." The words hung in the air like a quiet explosion. Hale froze. His officers fell silent. He understood what she meant, but he did not want to believe it. "Stop," he said firmly. "That's not what we do here." Lyra looked up slowly, tears shining in her eyes. "Then what do you do, Commander?" she asked softly. "Watch while children starve." He had no answer. His mind flashed back to Earth, to the faces of hungry civilians during the war, to the children who had looked up at him in the same way Nira had. He walked toward her, lowering his voice. "You don't have to sell yourself," he said. "You're not property." Lyra smiled weakly. "Then let me work. Let me serve. Not as property, but as purpose." The camp fell quiet. The soldiers who overheard turned away, ashamed. Hale finally sighed. "If you wish to stay, you will work in the med bay, help the doctors, learn our ways." Lyra bowed deeply, her silver hair brushing the dusty ground. "Thank you, Commander," she whispered. Later that day, she helped clean equipment, carried water, and learned to prepare human food packs. The crew watched her curiously, her quiet strength slowly earning respect. Her hands trembled at first when she touched human machines, but soon she moved with calm precision. Every night, after her shift, she visited Nira in the med bay. The little girl smiled brighter each time, whispering stories of her dreams. "I saw rivers again, Lyra," she said one evening, "and trees, and a sky that was blue." Lyra held her close. "Maybe one day, little one, you will see them for real." But rumors spread through the camp. Some soldiers mocked her sacrifice, calling her the alien servant. Others defended her, saying she had more honor than most humans. Commander Hale heard everything but said nothing. His silence was heavy, filled with guilt. One night, as the camp lights dimmed, Hale found Lyra sitting outside the ship, staring at the stars. "Why do you keep working even when you are exhausted?" he asked quietly. She looked at him, her eyes glowing softly. "Because it gives me something to believe in," she replied. "On my world, belief has died. I don't want my sister to live in that kind of emptiness." Hale stood beside her, the red horizon flickering behind them. For the first time, he saw not an alien, but a soul, a being who carried love so deep it crossed species and worlds. He wanted to say something, an apology, maybe admiration, but words failed. As the night grew colder, Lyra whispered, "You humans build great machines, but do you know what truly saves you?" Hale turned. "What?" She smiled faintly. "Your hearts, not your engines." Then she looked back at the stars, her voice breaking softly. "I gave mine away the day I offered myself." Hale looked down, his chest heavy with unspoken emotion. He walked away, but her words stayed with him long after. The next morning, the human base would receive a new order from orbit, one that would test the line between mercy and survival. But for now, under the dying red sky, one alien woman had reminded humanity what it meant to feel again. The sun rose pale and weak through the red clouds, casting long shadows across the human camp. Commander Hale stood by the fence, staring at the endless wasteland stretching beyond the horizon. He had seen many worlds, many tragedies, but none had stayed in his mind like the sight of those two alien sisters. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Lyra's trembling hands and Nira's hollow eyes. Lyra worked silently inside the med bay that morning, helping the doctors clean tools and carry supplies. Her movements were soft, graceful, and careful. The humans had stopped mocking her. Now they watched her in quiet respect. She didn't complain, didn't rest, didn't ask for more food. She only whispered gentle songs in her alien tongue as she worked, songs that made the med bay feel less cold. One young medic, Private Lewis, leaned closer to Hale and said, "Sir, she's not like the others we've met. She doesn't look at us with fear." Hale nodded slowly. "No, she looks at us with hope," he murmured. "And that's what makes this harder." Later that day, he went to check on Nira. The child sat on a bed near the window, her small body wrapped in a human blanket. She smiled when she saw him. "Commander Hale," she said softly. "Thank you for the food. Lyra says humans are kind." Hale smiled faintly. "Sometimes," he said. "But your sister is the kind one, not me." Nira shook her head. "You gave her work, and me food. That's kindness," she said with innocent certainty. Her words hit him harder than he expected. He looked away, hiding his guilt behind a tired smile. When he stepped outside, the soldiers saluted him, but he hardly noticed. Something inside him had begun to change. That night, the camp was quiet except for the soft hum of machines. Hale walked past the barracks and found Lyra sitting alone near the power generator. She was holding a small crystal pendant, faintly glowing blue. He stopped a few feet away. "You never told me what that is," he said gently. Lyra looked up, startled, then smiled faintly. "It is from my home. It holds the sound of our oceans." Hale sat down beside her. "Your planet had oceans?" he asked. She nodded, her voice calm but sad. "Yes. Once, before the droughts came, before the humans arrived to take the minerals, we thought the trade would save us. But it only brought hunger." She paused, her eyes reflecting the dim red light. "Yet, I don't blame you." That sentence broke something inside him. He wanted to argue, to say he wasn't responsible, that he had only followed orders, but he couldn't, because he knew deep inside. Humanity had done this before, on too many worlds. Hale whispered, "I'm sorry." Lyra turned to him, her eyes soft and glowing. "You are not the one who made the sky red, Commander, but you are the one standing under it now," she said quietly. "That means you can choose what happens next." Her words stayed with him long after she left. He returned to his tent, but he couldn't sleep. The reports on his tablet glowed. Supply shipments delayed. Local life forms starving. Mission resources limited. He stared at the words and felt disgust. These were not numbers. They were lives. The next morning, Hale gathered his officers. "We're increasing food distribution to local villages," he said firmly. "Use the extra rations from our reserves." The officers looked shocked. "Sir, that's against regulation. We'll be court-martialed." One said. Hale's expression was cold. "Then they can court-martial me. I won't watch children die while we sit on full bellies." Lyra didn't know of his decision until that evening. When soldiers began packing crates of food onto transports, she stood by the door, her eyes wide. "Commander, what are you doing?" He smiled faintly. Something right for once. Tears filled her eyes, but this time they were not from despair. "You will be punished," she said softly. Hale shrugged. "Maybe, but maybe it's time humans learn mercy again." That night, as the ships left to deliver aid, the sky above turned deep crimson. Lightning flashed far beyond the horizon. A storm forming over the desert. Lyra and Hale stood together under the glowing clouds. "Do you think mercy changes anything?" he asked. Lyra looked up, her voice steady. "Mercy doesn't change the world, Commander. It changes hearts, and hearts change everything." The first drops of rain fell on the dry earth. The wind smelled clean for the first time in years. Hale watched the rain fall over the broken land and whispered, "Maybe humanity still deserves to exist." Lyra smiled faintly. "Only if it learns to listen." As the storm grew, the humans and aliens worked together, building shelters and sharing food. For the first time, the camp felt alive, not as a base of soldiers, but as a colony of souls, bound by hunger, guilt, and the fragile hope of something better. The storm passed after 3 days, leaving the world washed but wounded. Pools of muddy water shimmered between cracked stones, and the camp smelled of wet dust and metal. The humans worked alongside the aliens to rebuild the shelters torn by the wind. Commander Hale watched from the command tower. His uniform still damp, his eyes distant. Something inside him had changed since the night he ordered the food drops. He no longer saw aliens. He saw people. Lyra had not slept much. She spent her days cleaning the med bay and her nights tending to the small plants she had found growing again near the camp's edge. They were weak, pale stems sprouting from the red soil, but they gave her hope. Every morning, she whispered to them, "Grow, little ones, grow for her," meaning her sister. Nira was recovering quickly. Her cheeks were no longer hollow, and her eyes had regained their shine. The human doctors called her the little star because she smiled at everyone, even when she was weak. One morning, Nira woke before sunrise. She looked out the tent flap and saw her sister kneeling near the small patch of soil, whispering softly to the growing plants. Nira's small heart filled with love and sadness. She wanted to help, to give something back. Later that day, she walked through the camp barefoot, clutching a small basket she had made from old fabric. The humans smiled and waved as she passed. She stopped near a fence where a young soldier, Private Lewis, was standing guard. "Can I go outside, please?" she asked sweetly. The soldier hesitated but then nodded. "Stay close to the gate," he warned. Outside the camp, Nira searched among the rocks and dirt. Her eyes caught a faint golden glow, a small fruit hanging from a struggling vine. She gasped and ran toward it. It was the first living fruit she had seen since the famine began. The skin was thin, the color like sunlight trapped in glass. She picked it carefully, holding it close like treasure. When she returned, her face glowed brighter than the fruit itself. She went straight to Commander Hale's tent. The guards tried to stop her, but Hale's voice called from inside. "Let her in." Nira walked up to him and held out the fruit with both hands. "This is for you," she said softly. Hale blinked, confused. "For me?" She nodded. "You helped my sister. You helped me. I want to share the first fruit of our land." Hale stared at the small golden orb. It was simple, imperfect, but it carried a meaning far heavier than its weight. He knelt down and took it gently. "Thank you, Nira," he said quietly. His voice almost cracked. "You have no idea what this means." The little girl smiled. "Lyra says gifts are not about what they're worth, but what they mean." That evening, Hale gathered the crew. He placed the fruit in the center of the table, under the warm lights of the mess hall. "This," he said, "is not just food. It's a promise that life can return." He ordered the crew to save the seeds, to study them, to find a way to grow them again. Lyra arrived late, surprised to see everyone gathered. When she saw the fruit, she froze, recognizing it at once. "Nira found this," she whispered. "I thought they were gone." Hale smiled. "She gave it to us. She said it was a gift for what we gave her." For the first time, Lyra felt tears of joy instead of sorrow. She looked around the room. Humans and aliens sharing food, laughter, and warmth. The sound filled her with something she had forgotten existed: hope. That night, Hale visited the garden patch outside the camp. The little plants swayed gently under the night breeze. Lyra stood beside him, her eyes soft and glowing. "They will grow stronger now," she said. "Rain and kindness make everything bloom." Hale nodded. "You and your sister have done more for this world than my whole crew." Lyra smiled faintly. "We only reminded you what was already inside you," she said. Hale looked at her for a long moment, the flicker of light catching the silver lines on her skin. "You remind me of what humanity used to be," he whispered. She tilted her head slightly. "Then maybe humanity is not lost yet." Far from them, in the corner of the camp, Nira slept peacefully, holding another seed she had kept from the fruit. She whispered before drifting into dreams, "Tomorrow, I'll plant this one too." Above them, for the first time in years, the clouds broke, revealing a thin blue streak across the sky, a sign that maybe, just maybe, the red world was beginning to heal. The days that followed were calm, almost peaceful. The plants near the human camp grew taller, their green leaves shimmering against the red dust. For the first time, the alien world didn't look entirely dead. Lyra and Nira spent every morning watering the fragile crops, while the humans brought more soil from the ship. Commander Hale watched them often, his chest filled with a strange warmth he could not name. But peace never lasted long on broken worlds. Word of the humans' generosity spread quickly, and not everyone saw it as kindness. Far beyond the valley, in the ruins of another settlement, alien tribes whispered, "The humans are taking our people, using them as slaves." Rumors twisted the truth until mercy became betrayal. One evening, the warning alarms shattered the calm. Drones reported movement approaching from the west. Armed aliens, nearly 50, marching toward the camp. The soldiers scrambled, loading rifles and setting up barriers. The sky turned dark again, thunder rumbling above the desert. Lyra ran to Hale's command post. "Please," she pleaded, "don't shoot them. They are desperate. They think you mean to enslave us." Hale's face hardened. "If they attack, we defend ourselves." Lyra shook her head. "If you fire, you'll turn hope into hate again." The first flashes of plasma lit the horizon. The rebels had opened fire. Bright bolts struck the metal walls, sending sparks into the night. Hale shouted orders. "Shields up. Do not fire unless absolutely necessary." The air filled with the sound of energy blasts and human shouting. Nira hid in the med bay, clutching the small seed she had saved. The ground shook under her feet as explosions echoed outside. Tears ran down her face. "Please, don't let them hurt Lyra," she whispered. Outside, Lyra ran through the smoke, trying to reach the alien attackers. "Stop," she cried in her native tongue. "These humans are not your enemy." But her voice was drowned by the chaos. A plasma bolt struck the ground near her, throwing her to the dirt. Hale saw her fall from the tower, and his heart clenched. He grabbed his rifle and sprinted into the field, ignoring the calls to stay back. The rebels reached the outer fence, faces twisted with fear and rage. Their leader shouted, "You sold our sister to them, and now you grow food for your masters." Lyra rose, bleeding from a cut on her arm. "No," she shouted back. "They fed us when the sky gave nothing. They saved my sister's life." The words silenced some, but not all. Another blast hit the human shield wall. Hale ducked and returned fire to the ground. Warning shots only. His soldiers held their aim, refusing to kill. In the middle of the chaos, a blast struck one of the power generators. Flames burst high, spreading fast across the field. Hale saw Nira's small silhouette near the med bay and froze. The fire was heading straight for her. He dropped his weapon and ran, shouting, "Lyra, your sister." Lyra turned and saw the flames rising like monsters from the earth. Without hesitation, she ran toward them, her lungs burning, her skin stinging from the heat. "Nira," she screamed, bursting through the smoke. The little girl was trapped under a fallen beam, coughing, her small hands clutching the seed tightly. "Lyra," she cried. Lyra's strength flared like fire. She pushed the beam aside, the muscles in her arms trembling. Hale reached them just as the structure began to collapse again. Together they pulled Nira free and stumbled out. The storm broke open above them, rain falling hard, hissing against the fire. The rebels stopped shooting, watching the sky as if the planet itself was crying. The thunder rolled across the valley, washing the rage away. Hale carried Nira in his arms, her face pressed against his chest. Lyra followed, coughing but alive. When they reached the med bay, she turned back toward the battlefield. The attackers stood still, their weapons lowered. The rain soaked their skin, their anger melting into confusion. Lyra stepped forward and shouted over the storm, "Look around you. We can kill, or we can heal. The choice is ours." Her voice rang clear even through the thunder. One of the alien warriors dropped his weapon and knelt. Others followed. Slowly, the red world fell quiet again. Inside the med bay, Nira lay weak but smiling. "The seed, it's safe," she whispered, opening her palm. The little seed gleamed faintly under the lights. Lyra kissed her forehead. "You did well, little one," she said softly. Commander Hale stood at the doorway, his uniform torn and wet. "You saved more than your sister tonight," he said quietly. Lyra turned to him, her eyes shining through the rain. "No, Commander, we saved each other." The storm outside raged for hours, but in the camp, there was peace, fragile, trembling, but real, and as lightning flashed across the sky, Hale felt something new bloom inside him. Faith, not in machines or armies, but in hearts that refused to give up on hope. The storm had passed, leaving the alien world drenched and trembling. Pools of water reflected the dying light. casting strange, wavering shadows across the camp. Lyra and Nira moved slowly through the mud, helping the humans repair walls and replace broken equipment. Yet, beneath her calm steps, Lyra felt a storm growing inside her, one that no rain could wash away. The alien attackers had gone, their weapons abandoned, but their anger lingered in whispers through the valley. Some humans praised Lyra for her courage. Others feared the power she represented. Hale watched her silently from the command tower, knowing that admiration was not enough to pay for the life she had risked so freely. That evening, as the camp lights flickered on, a new danger arrived. A sudden tremor ran through the ground. The old storage structure near the edge of the camp began to collapse. Weakened by the storm, Nira had been playing near it, carrying another seed from the golden fruit. Lyra saw her and ran without thinking. The beams of metal and wood shifted, ready to crush the small girl. Lyra dove forward, throwing herself on top of Nira. The heavy weight of the falling debris pinned her to the wet ground, pain exploding across her back and arms. Lyra! Nira screamed, banging on the debris. Hale and several soldiers rushed through the mud and fire, cutting and prying at the collapsing structure. The world seemed to stretch, every second unbearable. Lyra pressed Nira close, whispering words of comfort. "It's okay. I'm here. I'll protect you." Always, sweat and blood mixed on her skin, and she felt herself weakening. But her sister's life was more precious than her own. Finally, with a final push, Hale and the soldiers pulled Nira free, but Lyra was trapped, her body pinned under a heavy beam. The pain was blinding, but she smiled faintly as she looked at Nira. "You're safe, little one. That's all that matters." Her voice trembled, fading into the sound of rain. The medics arrived quickly, dragging Lyra free, but her injuries were severe. She lay on a stretcher, barely conscious, watching as Hale carried Nira in his arms, the child looking down at her with tears in her eyes. "Lyra, you saved me," Nira whispered. "I love you." Lyra tried to reach for her sister, but her fingers were weak. "I love you, always," she whispered back. The medics worked quickly, setting bones and treating burns, but it was clear her body had given everything. The cost of her mercy had become painfully real. Hale stood nearby, his hands trembling, guilt and admiration warring inside him. "You risked everything for a child, for hope," he said softly. "Why?" Lyra opened her eyes faintly. "Because love is worth more than life, than power, than survival." The camp was silent. Even the rain softened, as if the world itself paused to honor her sacrifice. Soldiers and humans alike gathered quietly, watching, realizing that courage and mercy were not measured by strength or weapons, but by what one would give for another. Hours later, Lyra's breathing steadied, but she could not rise. Nira slept on the cot beside her, clutching her sister's hand tightly. The small seed from the golden fruit rested between them, growing faintly in the dim light, a symbol of life, sacrifice, and hope. Hale knelt beside Lyra, his voice barely a whisper. "You gave yourself so others could live. I don't know how to repay that." She looked at him, eyes soft and glowing. "You don't just let it live, let it grow." That night, the humans and aliens shared stories of courage and kindness. Small fires lit the wet ground, flickering across tired faces. For the first time, Lyra felt no shame in what she had done, only the quiet pride of knowing that mercy, even at the highest cost, could spark hope across worlds. Above them, the clouds parted, and a thin ribbon of stars pierced the crimson sky. Lyra whispered, "May they remember that love can cross all boundaries." Hale stayed silent, letting her words sink into the night, realizing that humanity's greatest lesson had been written not in laws or weapons, but in the heart of a brave alien woman who had given everything to save her sister. Months passed since the storm, and the red world slowly began to breathe again. Pools of rainwater nourished the fragile plants, and the seedlings Lyra and Nira had planted started to grow. Hale walked among them often, observing the slow miracle of life returning. Each leaf, each small shoot, seemed to carry a piece of hope, a fragment of the sacrifices made months ago. Nira had grown stronger, her cheeks rosy and her laughter light, echoing across the camp. She ran barefoot among the sprouts, carrying seeds in small baskets. sharing them with the humans who had once feared her. She whispered to every plant, "Grow strong, for life, for Lyra." And somehow, the tiny green shoots seemed to listen. Lyra was recovering slowly. Her injuries healed, but the memory of her near-death lingered. She spent her days tending the garden, her hands deep in the soil, and teaching Nira the stories of their world, tales of rivers, of forests, of a blue sky that once stretched endlessly above their heads. Hale watched quietly, often from a distance, respecting the bond between the sisters. He had learned humility, mercy, and the value of small acts of courage from them both. One morning, Hale brought a human engineer to help expand the greenhouse. "This will ensure the seeds survive the dry season," he said. Nira's eyes widened. "Lyra, look, we can grow food for everyone." Her excitement was infectious, and even the gruff soldiers paused to watch the children run and plant. Lyra knelt beside Nira, holding her small hands. "Yes, little one. Now everyone will have what we barely survived," she whispered, smiling faintly. Her heart was heavy with memories of the storm, of the sacrifice she had made, but the joy in Nira's laughter lightened it, just a little. Hale walked to the center of the greenhouse, where a small memorial had been built, simple stones stacked in a circle, with a single plaque carved in both human and alien languages. She gave herself so others could live. It read, "The soldiers and medics had gathered quietly, leaving offerings of seeds, water, and small tools for the garden. Even the once angry alien warriors had sent word of respect for Lyra's courage." Lyra approached the memorial and placed a small seed from the golden fruit at its center. "This is for you, for hope, for tomorrow," she whispered. The wind carried her words across the greenhouse, rustling the leaves gently, as if the world itself listened. Hale stood beside her, looking at the thin ribbon of blue sky above the red horizon. "Your courage changed more than just your sister's life, Lyra," he said softly. "It changed all of ours." Lyra nodded, her eyes glinting. "Humanity can learn to be kind to heal, if it chooses to." Nira ran past them, carrying more seeds, laughing. Look, we can make the whole world bloom." Lyra smiled faintly, brushing a strand of silver hair from her face. Her sacrifice had not been in vain. The little girl's joy was the reward she could never have imagined. The greenhouse expanded, the camp thrived, and life returned slowly to the scarred world. Humans and aliens worked together, sharing knowledge, labor, and care, bound by a shared understanding that life was precious, and hope could grow in even the driest soil. That evening, as the twin suns set, Hale and Lyra stood side by side, watching Nira plant the final seeds of the day. The little sprouts glowed faintly in the orange light, promising growth, promise, and life. Lyra whispered to Hale, "This is the start of everything we could be together." Hale nodded quietly, realizing that the lesson of the sisters extended far beyond this world. It was a lesson for all species, across stars, across time, that even in despair, even in the harshest circumstances, mercy, courage, and love could seed the future. Above the greenhouse, the stars began to pierce the night sky, brighter than they had in years, and somewhere in the quiet, Lyra smiled faintly, knowing that Nira, the garden, and humanity itself had a chance to flourish, because even the smallest act of sacrifice could plant the seeds of tomorrow.